Probably no jokes in this one, huh?
Nah. Maybe Packers suck dick?
Not a fan of the Brett Favre.
He's alright, but I just don't give a shit about the present day people. And I go all day about sports, how the Lions had a nice offseason, the Packers, they had a terrible offseason, and the Lions are going to take the division this year. So sorry, Green Bay. You're going down, bitch! Ugh, sports!
I know a lot about sports.
Oh, shit. So what do you think about the NFC North?
Detroit is directed by Kathryn Bigelow, written by Mark Bowl. This is almost like the completion of her unofficial Real Events trilogy. After The Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30, we now have a movie about the infamous Detroit riots from the 60s. Many people were wrongfully imprisoned, wrongfully killed. The police were incredibly brutal. Lots of looting, crime. It was a horrible, terrible, everything's complete shit
Yeah, it's fucked up.
time, and this movie documents it. Similar to the way Hurt Locker and Zero Dark 30 was filmed, very documentary-esque, almost Paul Greengrass-ish, where it's a lot of shaky cam, crash zooms. There isn't anything about the movie that feels terribly theatrical. It feels very much so like you're watching a real event, and I don't adore Hurt Locker or Zero Dark 30. I think they're both fine.
Yeah, I can agree with that statement. I think Hurt Locker is all right. We talked in the car before going into the film that I preferred Avatar were to win the Oscar because I liked Jim Cameron, and I wanted that one to win. But Hurt Locker is all right. I liked Zero Dark 30 more, but still, I felt like it was just long and great climax.
Yeah, I think Zero Dark 30 is better too, but there's just something about that movie that felt like there were so many extra subplots that were presented for factual purposes that maybe didn't have to really add anything to the movie. When it comes to Detroit, I would say it's actually my favorite of those three. I think this movie is pretty horrifying. There are so many sequences where my hands were just gripped on my knees. Easily the most intense scene for myself when I watched the movie, I don't know how about you, but the Algiers motel sequence was terrifying. A lot of black men are lined up on a wall and two white women, and police essentially are antagonizing them for like a few hours, really. I mean, in the movie, it was probably about, I would say, an hour's worth of screen time. It was a big sequence because it's kind of integral to the movie. And they believe that someone fired a shot out of one of these windows. And someone did, sort of. I don't want to ruin it in case the viewers don't know the story behind the event, but they spend a very long time beating these men, forcing confessions out of them, and murders occur, and it's terrifying. It's horrifically sad that this occurred. And it is a very long scene. It's kind of the heart of the major drama of the movie. Most of the tension revolves around that moment. And it does go on a while.
Yeah.
It didn't bother me, though, because I was so sucked into it. I'm curious what you thought about it.
I was sucked into it, too. However, I actually talked with FlickPick before we pressed record for this review. And I told him I felt like this movie would have been better if it wasn't a movie, if it was a stage play. The film starts off with a little bit of intro about the riots. You're kind of just thrown into the mix.
Yeah.
But the whole film really is that hotel stuff. And then afterwards, there's some resolution and stuff, but it keeps like dragging on and on. And I felt like if it was just titled and based more so on the actual hotel stuff on stage, because that's all it is, like one room essentially. They go in other places. But if it was contained to that kind of like area on stage, I felt like it would have been way better of a story.
It's interesting. I would say that they do set up the characters throughout the film like in other places too. Like, there's one character who wants to be a singer and all of his friends are in a band, and he's about to go on stage and perform, but due to the riots, they're called away and they get sucked into this horrible event. And John Boyega in the film plays a security guard at like a small shop.
Yeah, it's like his second job.
Yeah, he also works as like, I think it was a mill worker or something, or he worked at like a metal sheet factory, something like that. And he is the one guy who's watching all these atrocities happen, and he's getting some respect from white cops because he's in a uniform.
Yeah.
But you can tell the way they talk to him, it's almost like they're talking to a child. Like they're very subtly antagonizing him. Like he brings the officers coffee, and when the one guy's like, I'm surprised it's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
And then you cut back to Boyega, and he's got this look, and he's like, well, I didn't have my normal materials to make coffee for people. Sorry. And you can tell that he's trying to find a way to get some humor into the situation, because he knows if he antagonizes these cops, it could easily go down, because they're all, not all, but a large majority of the cops depicted in this movie are just racist assholes.
Yeah. There's a lot of racism, and I felt like this film could have been like, it could have been better. It could have been anything. Because the film sets up the riots, which I know not much about, but I know some. The whole reason why things went up to this point, the riots starting, was the schools. A lot of people left to the suburbs. A lot of black people in the city had like very low end jobs, like in factories and stuff. Black people being discriminated against in bars, so they therefore went to make their own bars, which is the Blind Pig, which we saw at the beginning of the film that got raided, that started the whole riot.
Right.
That whole party, the Blind Pig, was, if you saw at the beginning, you have a very keen eye. Two guys dressed up as like military dudes. The whole party was to celebrate them coming back from like Vietnam or something.
Yeah.
But that's just like not talked about in the film at all, and I felt like if we just had a little bit of setup for why things are gone up to this point in the summer or whatever it was of '67 for Detroit, that we could have got some like real light shed on the situation, because there's a lot of prejudice, like black people going into stores, they have to pay more money than white people for the department stores in Detroit and all kinds of stuff like that. So
yeah, it's true. I can understand that actually, because there's an opening sort of animation that basically quickly montages through how Detroit, the city, in the 60s got to the point where it was, where, like you just said, all those things. And it was very quick, and it felt... the animation choice was weird to me. Like, in the first... I actually thought it was some sort of strange preview that was being shown before the movie.
Me too.
It was almost like this weird little Sesame Street animation. Like, they had these little paper... like, they tried to make, like, 2D paper look like 3D, and I was like, this doesn't really mesh with what I was expecting.
Yeah.
That being said, it's such a quick thing. But like you said, it does touch on probably my one real issue I have with the movie, is that you are really just thrown into the riots. Besides that opening montage, it opens with, like you said, the Blind Pig bar. Cops are outside, and it starts. So I can see where you're coming from. I can see that there isn't as much light shed on to how the people got to this state in that city. But at the same time, I really liked how it was just, boom, we're in this. And I felt like the heat of that night. Like, everyone looked sweaty, everyone looked tired.
Yeah.
I felt like I was there. It felt like I was watching real events, even though I knew a lot of these actors' faces. Because none of them are treated like stars.
Yeah.
Anthony Mackie's in this movie, and he's not treated like a star. You learn some things about his character, but he feels sort of like a real person that's just there, and you feel for him, because, again, I haven't really been this mad in a long time watching a movie. I was just mad. There are so many things depicted in this movie by these cops, and I gotta honestly say, I gotta give it to these actors who portray the cops, because that is an incredibly hard role.
Yeah.
Will Poulter plays, like, the lead high honcho.
The guy with his eyebrows like this whole time?
He's like the big... like the Hitler of these guys.
He's pretty much Hitler.
Who basically rallies all of them to do these really horrible things. He was terrifying in this movie. I thought it was a great performance. Really, everyone's good. John Boyega, I thought, was excellent, too, because he has a really difficult job. He has to sell that he's angry about what he's witnessing, but not let any of the other people around him see it.
Yeah. That's why he takes him off, and like in the trailer, I have to make you survive the night. I need you to survive the night.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I wonder how all those pieces played into the film. And like you said, I didn't know shit about Anthony Mackie, and we end up finding out later in the film who he is and whatnot. But you kind of just throw in the mix, and like you said, a pretty good analysis that no one's treated like a star. Like, you're not gonna go in thinking, yeah, Finn. But it's like, no, he's part of the story, but it's not like, oh,
right.
You know,
he doesn't get a grand wide shot as he enters frame. You know, it's just like, oh, there he is, and he's a character in this movie.
Right.
There's no sweeping Michael Bay.
Yeah, he plays his part, and it treats the story like a story rather than like a film.
I went into this movie, I was unsure, because I've always found Zero Dark 30 and Hurt Locker a tad overrated. And so I went into this movie being like, well, this is a story ripe with drama, but I don't know how she's going to handle it. And some might find it a little too long. I think you felt that way.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, what do you think you would remove from the movie without giving any spoilers? I mean, obviously, this is a historical event, but there's text that comes up in the credits that says some things had to be recreated for dramatic purposes because we didn't know everything.
Yeah.
So, is there characters or scenes that you feel perhaps could be removed to make it better?
I don't know. I think if I were to like write or rewrite the film, I would definitely start off with something that wasn't like a paper mache, like 5-minute intro.
That is probably my worst.
Honestly,
the worst part of the movie.
It wasn't that bad, but I felt like we needed one scene of maybe one of the main characters, like the singer guy, or maybe Boyega, at the start for 5 minutes, going into a department store, or actually it should have been like a bar, like a regular Detroit bar, and a white bartender told him to get the hell out of there, or he wouldn't serve his kind or something, and then go into the night of that night and see why blind pigs were created, because black people were discriminated against, so they can't go to a white bar or just a bar in general being discriminated against by white people. Just make your own bar. Boom, done. And then the GI people come in. Oh, it's a party for the GI people. Then people come in, and then we start to connect with these people.
It's tough for me because whenever I watch a movie that has historical events, things that actually happened, I want to go in and dissect like what makes it work as a film, like what makes it entertaining.
Yeah.
Versus what happens and what needs to be presented. And then when you see like a fictional movie and you can just pick it apart, and it feels more comfortable. With Detroit, so many things happen, and then they actually show you recorded footage from the actual riots, and then photographs taken of dead bodies in the same way they were just depicted in the film. And when I saw those photos, it just kind of sunk into my heart that these things happened. Maybe not in the exact way they're depicted, but they happened. These people were killed, and there was no evidence to suggest they did anything. And it's more frightening to me than any horror film that I've seen this year. Because one of the things I noticed while I was watching it, the audience was reacting to seeing these cops the same way an audience reacts to Michael Myers popping out of the bushes.
That's true.
They were scary. Like, there's this scene where these two guys, they're trying to get out of the motel, and they're looking for an exit because they have this one moment where they can escape. They've been lined up against the wall with their hands against the wall for like an hour or two or whatever. They finally see this chance to escape, and they're looking for back rooms and exits. And in the background of the shot, you see this cop like appear at the doorway, and they're like, "Oh fuck!" and they run the other way. And I was like, that was like straight up like a horror movie.
Yeah. That's
like
true.
It was terrifying.
Yeah, it's
and
true.
it was just a cop. The people in Detroit were not going to give up. They wanted certain things to be just and right, and certain wrongs to be righted. And the cops, they're an unstoppable force with all their weapons and everything. And these two things colliding, it was just a horrific, gigantic clusterfuck of terrible events.
Yeah.
And I found that the movie depicted it well and humanized a lot of the characters in it well enough for me to care.
There's one thing you said about clusterfuck, and that's why I feel like this film would have been better if we had just a little bit of setup, because we can get to that moment to where the people riot. Because if they just riot because of people got arrested unjustly, people are going to be like, well, okay. But if we had like reasons why it hit to this moment, then like, oh shit, yeah, I want to riot too. Let me throw my phone at the screen, you know? Like,
I get it.
It's fucked.
I can see that criticism. I really can. And I kind of agree with it. It's very much so you're thrown into the mix. But I like that because so many of the citizens in this movie of Detroit are also just like, what the hell's going on? What is this? This is insanity. This is America. Why is this happening on our streets? There's a crushing sequence, which I don't want to spoil, but it involves someone thinking they saw a sniper in a window early on in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
That fucking crushed me, dude. Like, that was
it's fucked.
The guy sitting behind me, I heard him just go, oh. And that's how I felt.
Like almost the whole theater, yeah.
The movie impacted me, and it made me mad. It made me angry. It did its job for me. It's clearly trying to give justice to people who never got it.
Yeah.
Because we've seen this today a lot.
A lot. Too much.
We're not going to get too much into that, but lots of people have been wronged, and this movie is a loud cry to give some justice to the stories of these people, to their lives. And it deserves to be seen, I think.
So we talked about the documentary style, which I haven't seen Zero Dark 30 in a long time. I saw it once in theaters. I saw Hurt Locker once.
Yeah.
So when she started off that, handheld, I liked it. I thought it was a good choice. I was like, good, we're thrown in the mix, very immersive. But about 2/3 of the way through, I was like, all right, I'm sick of this. Maybe because there's too much handheld.
There's a lot of cuts. There's a lot of cuts.
Maybe that was it. But I overall thought it was a good choice to do that. And you said earlier about having the real life footage there and having it impact you. I felt like maybe it was just maybe a little too jarring away from the focus.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't feel that way.
I felt like it should have been just on the people. Maybe at the beginning and the end you have that real life shit. But I don't know. I didn't agree with that creative choice. I knew about the riots and stuff, but I went into the film thinking, all right, we're gonna not like get explained, but there's gonna be some kind of thing to build up to. Like people don't know what the hell. Like people our age, we weren't around the fucking 60s.
Yeah.
Like how did people go into this film and feel about what's going on if they don't know what happened really?
Mm-hmm.
But you have to pretty much go into this film knowing the events and how it happened to really understand the story.
It's true, and that contradicts the marketing campaign because the tagline of the movie is "It's time we knew."
Yeah,
and it's sort of it reminded me of a completely different movie, The Amazing Spider-Man.
Oh, about to say
the Amazing Spider-Man's tagline was "The Untold Story." And you go to it, and it was Uncle Ben fucking dying, and you're like, yeah, I've seen this a billion times.
Peter Parker's parents again, or this time.
In Detroit, yeah, you do kind of have to have a base knowledge of the events that happened that led to its starting. But that's so quick that it didn't bother me. You do have that quick montage in the beginning, and perhaps they screened the film to somebody, and some audience said, I don't know what's happening, blah, blah, blah. So we'll make a last-minute crappy animation at the beginning to explain something. Maybe. Yeah. Because that just felt like a totally different movie. It felt like they just gave it to somebody else. But enough about the fucking montage.
That's great. Fantastic.
There were also a few characters in the film that don't really get much of an arc. Boyega's character, in particular, is one of my favorites in the movie and a standout, but the way his character wraps up, it's kind of like, eh.
Yeah, it fizzles.
And the reason I have no problem with this is because sometimes in life, real people just have to deal with something bad that happened, and sometimes there is no justice.
Yeah.
And this movie and the fact that it exists is almost like the smallest little amount of justice. Like, look, we're going to give you something and tell everyone your horrible story. Because, bad things happen, and unfortunately sometimes there isn't an amazing cinematic arc that occurs for those people. And so it didn't bother me.
Yeah, well, nowadays we see a lot of negative shit with cops in the news. And meanwhile, there are good cops. And there was depicted as a sequence in the film where there were some good cops, including the police chief who calls out the one guy. I was like, great, yes, we have
Thank you.
there's some normal cops to the left. So
it was nice. They showed a few scenes. It wasn't just like all cops are Nazis.
In the '67, they had, because they brought in like the National Guard. They had the one guy. There's a sequence in the film, State Trooper, Michigan. Disagreement with the Detroit police. So, and the Detroit police were like pretty fucking racist back in the '60s. So this film depicted it pretty damn well.
Yeah.
But there's also other people who are like, I don't know what's going on, and they kind of turn a blind eye, which is actually pretty much a mirror image of what's going on in real life.
It's sad.
It really is.
And that's kind of how relevant it is.
It is, yeah.
Because there are sequences where a certain cop might be in a position to help, and then they turn and they think about all the red tape of jurisdiction and that's National Guard and I'm Army, or that's Detroit PD and I'm this other jurisdiction, and they don't even want to go through the red tape. And I could hear the members of the audience, oh my God.
Yeah,
because that's really what it's like, and that's why the system's fucked, and unfortunately still is. But beyond politics, that we can get into here, talking about this movie that is obviously very politically charged, this conversation makes total sense that we're having after what, trust me, this is an early review, but when you guys see Detroit, you're going to be sitting down with your friends having the same convo.
Yeah, and you should be too. Yeah,
you really should. It's not the best movie I've seen. It's not the movie of the year. that you'll probably see a billion times on every poster, but it is a damn good movie, I think, and one that honors the people involved with it. And I'm going to give Detroit an A-.
It was probably Bigelow's, like you said. It was probably her best film. I felt like maybe someone like John Singleton should have made this movie, and maybe he would have focused it more on a little bit of build up, and then maybe the hotel.
He'd probably do a damn good job too.
I felt going out of the theater a 6, my honest opinion. So
yeah, no, that's fair, man. So. That's fair. That's pretty much kind of where I was with Zero Dark and with Hurt Locker. It was fine. They were fine.
Yeah.
They didn't blow me away. This one, for some reason, it was so charged.
Oh yeah, I can still recommend it for people. Absolutely.
The environment was just so hot and energized with tension that I was pretty much riveted from scene 1 to the end.
And like you just said, we're having this discussion. You told people that friends are going to have discussions with friends.
Yeah.
The guy next to me is like, "Hey man, thanks for coming out here." And I'm like, he's a black guy, and I was like, "Yeah, no problem, dog." And he shook your hand too. And he's like, "Hey, what's your name?" I was like, "I'm Matt." And then, "What's you, Chris?" And then it's like, you were talking about that. He's like, "Yeah, it's great, bring cultures together." I was like, "Absolutely."
Yeah, he was like, "Just want to let you know, culture to culture. Thanks for watching this movie with us." And I was like, "Oh, you're welcome, man." And then it was like, shake hands. I had no idea who he was. Never met him in my life.
I don't know who he was either.
Guys, I would recommend Detroit. Check it out. It's very harsh and unforgiving, but I think it's worth a watch. Definitely check out Matt's channel as well. Not harsh, not unforgiving, and is worth a watch.
It can be harsh.
You can be harsh and you can be unforgiving. In the best ways, though.
Yeah, indeed.
In the best ways. Guys, thank you very much for watching. And as always, if you like this, you can click right here and get Stuckmanized.